Hey everybody, I'm going to make some drawers today. I've got these nightstands I've been building. I got 4 of them to make, and I need to make drawers. Now there's lots of ways to make a drawer. You can do a real simple corner joint. You could do just a lap joint, but I prefer to do dovetails because, not that they're necessarily any better, but I feel that they are a lost art that needs to be kept as a handmade thing. So I cut my dovetails by hand. I don't use any tools to cut most of the joint, although I do use some power tools along the way. So I thought I'd just show you how I do it. So here's my fronts. I cut them pretty close to size of the opening, only maybe say a 1/16 of an inch narrower than the drawer opening. I do that for a couple of reasons. When I lay out the tails, I use my marking jig and mark down this way, mark down the other side. The depth of this is set the thickness of the drawer sides plus about a 1/16 of an inch. When I mark the fronts, I use the same setup, marking them on the ends and marking them on the back. What that does is when I cut everything, when the sides fit into the front, it leaves you extra wood out here that then you sand off, which makes the joint look nice and clean. And it also will then, just by default, make your drawer the right width, so it's not too sticky, not too loose. You don't want to make drawers that are going to swell someday and then get stuck in the cabinets. So I start by working on my drawer sides, and I'm making the tails for the dovetail. Once you mark with your marking jig, whatever it is, whatever kind of gauge you have, then I take my angle tool, and there's a 6:1 and a 7:1. I use the 6:1 measurement to mark the angles. Mine are never identical all the way across. I just make them where I have an appropriate number of tails for the project at hand. They can be as big or small as you like. The one thing that differentiates hand-cut dovetails from router-cut ones is that you make the pin so small that it couldn't possibly be cut with a router. So I like to make them, keep them nice and skinny, where they could only be cut with a chisel. That way, in 50 years, when somebody opens one of my pieces of furniture, they know that these are hand-cut. So I use a bandsaw to do the first cuts for a couple of reasons. First of all, the bandsaw is perfectly square to the table. There's no reason to handsaw that out. And it also gives me a little thicker kerf here, so when I knock out this little piece of waste, it doesn't get bound up. So I just put a board on the workbench to act as a stop. I get a 1/4 inch chisel, and I start cleaning out this waste. First is just very light cuts, just tapping it to mark the first cut. I don't want to go crazy here, because if I do, the chisel would dent the good part of the wood. So all I want to do is use my cut line as the guide, and the back side, the flat side of the chisel. Then my board stop here, it's there so I can chip out this little chunk right here. I just want to take out one little piece of wood. Once you take out that one little chunk, it gives you a nice little reference point. So I do these in 4 moves. That's move number 1. Then I flip it over. Make move number 2. Sometimes they fly right out at your face. Give that a light tap. Then I chip out these little spots here too. Having good sharp chisels is the key. Also keeping your workbench nice and smooth, because if you don't, you'll get weird dents in the sides of your drawers or in the drawer fronts, and you don't want that on your finished work. Now I can give this a couple more taps. Get a little more aggressive, but I'm still not trying to remove all the waste yet. Just trying to break those end fibers loose. Then when I flip it over for the 4th cut, that's when I can pop everything out. I'm holding my chisel so it can't hit my workbench. I'm keep using my pinky as a stop here because I don't want to tear up my workbench. It's already had a hard enough life. So then you pop out these little dudes. They can be frustrating. If you use a little Japanese saw to make those cuts instead of the bandsaw, it's really hard to get these out. It's hard enough when they're bandsaw. Like this one needs one more chop. And once you get that, look through it, and if you got any high spots, because you're dealing with end fiber here, and sometimes the part in the middle just kind of has to break out. I like to use ash for drawer sides because it's nice and hard, so the tails are nice and clean, nice and crisp looking when you glue the drawer together. And because against my walnut furniture, the ash just really stands out really nice. So now I've already done the other 7, so now I've got 8 drawer sides. One more thing, when I lay out the tails, I'm always making sure that I'm about 5/16 from each side. It doesn't matter right now which is up or down. I do that because then when I cut the groove for the drawer bottom, that groove is going to live within the tail. That way you're never running your saw out of any, you can never see the drawer bottom. Because then when I cut the corresponding socket on the bottom, or on the side of the drawer front, the saw cut is hidden. So then when your drawer bottom goes in, you don't have to worry about, making a bad decision and your cut being in the wrong spot. So I'm always thinking about that. Your first starter pin is always kind of dictates where your drawer bottom is going to go. So after we get all those cut, then we start figuring out, I've already marked these. The worst looking side is the inside and my nice face. And I've taken my marking gauge and I've marked a line here. I've marked a line on the end. If you do the right measurement, you never have to change your marking gauge. You can always keep it the same. So then, I take the drawer front, find 2 drawer sides, check them out, and I decide what's going to be inside, outside, up and down. So looking for defects, anything I don't want to show. And I'm going to mark these. This will be A, because these are not interchangeable. We'll just say A and B. You can mark them however you want. So I'm going to clamp these in the end vise right at the tip top of the workbench. I want it just flush with the workbench. I'm going to turn the B in because this is the outside. I'm going to just lay the drawer side onto the drawer front. I'm going to get out my trusty pocket knife. They make fancy knives for doing this, but I find a good pocket knife does it just as well. Once you lay your drawer side on there, you're referencing it off of the little cut line that you made with your with your marking gauge. So line the drawer up, line the side up, flush top and bottom, flush with the line. That way you know everything is going to be square. So you don't want to make a twisted drawer. I take my knife and I make a cut along each side of each one of the tails. So now I'm laying out the pins of a dovetail. anything to slip while you're doing this. Okay, so now I've laid out the part I'm going to remove from the drawer front. I've laid the tails out on here, and what's left will be our pins. It's really easy to be accurate when you use knives to cut because it makes a nice reference point for your chisel. Now, if you do this every single day, you can skip this step, but I've always found it to be handy. Is that I take a knife, and right where that incised line meets the top edge, I'm just going to take my knife, lay it in that groove, and just roll it around the edge. I just roll it up just so I can see what's going on top. Making drawers by hand is not rocket science. It just takes some patience. And really, once you get going on these, you know, I can make a drawer in 45 minutes that'll last 100 years. Adds more value to the furniture. So it really works good all the way around. Looks cool. There's lots of ways to do it. This is just the way I do it. So now I'm taking my square and I want to mark. You don't have to mark this line with a square. I find it handy too. So my knife is the reference point there. Slide the square over to it. Mark these lines going in. You just lay your knife in there. Move your square over to it. Got a cabinet to build next that has 24 dovetail drawers in it. Cutting 24 drawers of varying sizes is a good study in dovetail cutting. All right, now today we just have 4 to do. Last one, I gotta flip a square over, put the knife on the reference line, slide it over. It's always the hard one for her. Okay, now we've marked, we've lined out where all of our pins are gonna be. I wanna make sure not to remove the wrong material, especially when you're getting started at this. So you can take a Sharpie, pencil, and just X out the spots that are gonna leave so you don't accidentally cut on the wrong side of the line. So after we get we've got the pins laid out on the end, we've got the pins laid out on the back side of the drawer. I'm gonna grab, I prefer Japanese saws because they cut on the pull stroke. And they cut really well. This one's worn out, but it'll do. So what I'm doing now, I'm gonna cut a diagonal that connects the inside line to the end line, but I'm not gonna cut right on those knife marks. I'm gonna leave, a 30-second of wood there because I wanna do that final cut with a chisel. So this just helps to get the waste out. If you look at old furniture, a lot of times you'll see these saw cuts and they'll run wild into the drawer because there would have been somebody in that shop that all they did all day was cut dovetail drawers. They just go back and forth, making sure you're in the waste section before you cut. I also find it good to do most of this work sitting down. It's more comfortable, gives you more control. If you get too close, just move your saw over and try again. You do not want to cross your lines into the tails, because then you're gonna have a sloppy drawer. It's not gonna look nice. And please don't use wood filler to cover up your bad dovetail cutting. And the last cut. Okay, you don't have to do that step. It just makes life a little bit easier. So now I'm going to grab like a 3/4 inch chisel for this. I always make the tails no smaller than 3/4. That way my chisel fits all the way down. So now all we have to do is take our chisel, lay it on this line that we've incised in here. That line makes a nice reference. Rock it up to 90 and work your way across the drawer front. Just giving it a good firm tap. Again, we don't want to go crazy at this point because we don't want to dent the wood on the inside of that line. Now, once we've done this, I'm going to have to adjust my stop block. Okay, once we've done the first cuts, take our chisel, and we just want to take out a little bit of this waste here. We'll put our chisel on the edge. We're taking out a very small amount of waste, maybe a 1/16 of an inch. Straight grained wood makes this process far, far simpler. If you have something that's really curly, life gets a lot harder. So straight grained drawer fronts are always nice. So we're just popping out the first 1/16 or so. Working our way across. Okay. So we popped out the first part. Now we can hit harder and get rid of some waste. Working my way across, making sure not to hit the pins. I'm just chopping out the waste for the tails. Those little saw cuts make it so we can just go along, popping out this part. Now sometimes, like this one, you'll have a chunk of wood and you don't want to force that out of there, because what you can do is you can chip off the corner of your pin. You don't want that to happen. So sometimes I go in here to angle each direction. Pop out that little chunk. Then you can come back in the middle. If the bigger chisel's not working for you, you can just grab one of your smaller ones. Been building furniture for 22 years. Mark Whitley Studio. But this is my first YouTube video. So then just work your way back across. These cuts we're taking out about 1/8 inch of stock at a time. experience will show you when your chisel's at 90 degrees. I'm always trying to hold it perfectly 90. That's really just a matter of experience. So then we'll keep popping out this waste. Working walnut so well because it really works beautifully for this. Grain lets this waste pop out really easy. Usually takes 3 or 4 times across to get as much wood out of here as I need to. Taking out chunks at a time. As you get down, you run out of that diagonal saw cut you made, so it gets a little tougher to get the little pieces out. Never get greedy. About a 1/16 of an inch. The stakes get really high, like you have a cabinet with matched drawer fronts. You can't screw up one, so you have to be extra careful. These are pretty simple. These are just little walnut nightstands made to match some beds I made last year. Go across again. You hit pretty hard now once you don't chop through your drawer front, because there's no worry of the drawer front splitting. You're not putting that sort of pressure on. By this time, we should be getting about as deep as we need to go. So now what we're going to do is move our board. I'm going to use our vise here. Clamp it in here like this. Split out everything else that we can without getting all the way to our lines. We've not touched any of the 3 lines yet that we've marked. All we're doing is removing everything that's not a drawer side. Sneak up on the line in the back, or the line along the front edge of the drawer, and with nice straight grained wood, these pieces split out really easily. now we've gotten that far. I take 1/4" chisel a lot of times and get down into these corners. They make special chisels to do this with, but a 1/4" chisel does it just fine. You can kind of slice that off. You're sort of paring it off of there. Undercutting a little bit. And you can use little chisel to split away some of this waste. And cut off the end grain there. Okay, now we can do our first cut on our real line. Sometimes I like to just stand up and just slice these. I'm working on the real line now, so I have to be careful. So if you go to your lines that you've cut and keep everything square, there's almost zero fitting necessary for dovetails. It's got to fit. And we go along, I'm pushing here just to get that last bit. We don't have a lot of wood thickness here. It's a little less than a 1/4", so you can't get too crazy or you'll bust your whole front off. Okay, so now I've got the front edge of each socket cut. Now I'm gonna turn my chisel on edge and I'm gonna start slicing this out. Don't get too crazy on this one, or you will break your pins off. Going back and forth. We have our knife line here. Let's just work this direction right now. We're sneaking up on the knife line. I don't want to get it all at once. Small chisel, undercut that a little bit more. I'm sure you could get most of this out with a router if you wanted to go to that sort of trouble to set up a jig, but to me it's never been worth doing it. Besides, it's good to keep older ways of doing stuff alive. Everything can't be made by machine. There we go. Now I'm working right on my line. Right on the line. Very carefully. This is not a demonstration. This is my real furniture. Okay. The other great thing about handwork is it's quiet. It's almost relaxing. Go back across this way. I never use the chisel. I don't use it much going this way. You can, but you're very prone to split something if you get too excited going in the wrong direction. You always got to bear in mind which way the wood wants to split. Okay, now there's always a little wood left in these front corners. I find that with your wide chisel, get over there and you can slice that little corner out. Okay, clear more stuff out. A lot of my work is twisty and curvy and super contemporary and modern, but I gotta say, doing some straight up old school woodworking once in a while is the only way. It's the only foundation that I had to get to the crazy stuff. It all starts with learning the rules so you can break the rules. We're getting really close now. Okay. I'm gonna get this side. Chisel right on that line. See how tiny these pins are? Nobody's ever gonna think they were cut with a router. Okay, and check all your lines. Do the last bit of cleaning out. Just popping this stuff out of here. Sometimes you can get that last little speck of stuff in the corner. And you don't want to force the dovetail drawer together. Something will break. I promise you that. Something will break if you go forcing at this point. Or when you do your first test fit. But if we did it well, shouldn't have much fitting to do. You don't even have to have all these tools. The only thing you have to have is some really sharp chisels, which is a whole other, well, there's plenty of ways to learn to sharpen a chisel. I use these bar chisels. They're handmade. They're just a joy to use, and they hold an edge, seems like, for weeks. Okay. Now, the last thing I do is I look down here and I make sure that this line on the inside is parallel to the front, so there's no grain run out. Sometimes you have to take your wide chisel, go back in and slice out just a bit of that. These are called half-blind dovetails, because you can only see half of them. I prefer cutting them as to full dovetails or through dovetails. For one thing, nothing shows on the inside, so you get all the strength without having to have it absolutely perfect. you still get all the strength. One more run across here. Let's see how we did. Now we got our side number B. Right in here. Light tap. Looks like I've got a little bit of waste in here I need to clean out still. Just pare that off if there's any extra in there. We've got a tight spot somewhere. Let's see if we can find it. It's right here. And this is a little tight here. We have to go all the way to our line. A lot of times, it's the front of the socket that causes your tightness, depending on exactly how the wood grain runs. It's looking pretty good. Okay. So I got a little fat spot right here. This is my first one I've done in a while. Maybe I should have shown you my 8th one. I'll be a little quicker at it. But it just shows this process just takes some time. There you go. So now you have your first dovetail cut. Once I get it cut, take my square just to double check. If you cut your dovetails right, you're nice and square right off the bat. So there's not a lot of adjusting to do when you're gluing your drawers together. So that's one. Now I've got to mark. I'll start marking what's up and down, mark where my groove goes, and start working on the next one. It's just that over and over again. Now I make them all exactly the same, and then when I glue the drawers together, I trim off just about a 1/16 of an inch at the drawer bottom, so when it goes into the cabinet, I have a little bit of a reveal along here. But I don't do that until after I've cut everything. And then once this is driven all the way in with glue, once I sand off the end of these pins, it's all nice and flush, and the drawer front will have the right amount of side-to-side play, because right now it's very tight in there. It would probably swell up in the summertime and not fit. So I'm Mark, and that's how I make my drawers. You can check me out all over the internet, Mark Whitley Studio. Thank you.